Welcome to the very first episode of Burton and Therchin Podcast. We're launching this podcast on July 1st, the day that China is forcing its so-called ethnic unity and progress law. And with Charles and I, we're trying to bring a combination of an academic and an activist perspective to present different China-related topics to Canadians. We're also going to try and see if we can, reduce the gap between the world of academia and the advocacy world, and basically present ideas that are of interest to Canadians. So on this first day, we're here in Ottawa, and Charles, I think we're going to have a wonderful journey in launching this podcast, discussing a very, relevant and timely issue related to China, as the world itself is, trying to understand China under Xi Jinping.
I'm really looking forward to it. I think we're going to provide a perspective on China that's fair, unbiased, unideological, and focused on what's in the interests of ordinary Canadians as we face the challenge of that regime that's more and more encroaching inside to Canada. So, we're going to have it based on the facts and not based on ideology or accusations against the Chinese Communist regime, which are not justified. We'll certainly find lots of accusations against Chinese Communist regime which are fully justified. And we'll probably get into somewhere down the road, how Canada is responding to China and why it is our government is not able to fulfill the wishes of Canada to have a foreign policy towards China that's based on Canadian values and the interests of Canadians as a whole, as opposed to violating those principles which make our country a great country and serving the interests of a small moneyed elite. As we talk, today is Canada Day, where we reaffirm what we believe in as Canadians, and it's also the 105th anniversary of the founding of the Chinese Communist Party in Shanghai in 1921, and as my dear friend Sherop said, the day of implementation of a law which is evidently designed to assimilate all of the nations of China, whether they're Tibetans, Mongols, Uyghurs, Miao, what have you, into a new identity based on Chinese communist values that's referred to as the Chinese ethnicity, a Chinese nation, a concept which, never existed before. It's always been the Han, the Tibetans, the Uyghurs, the Mongols, and the Miao. The idea of China is that it's a country, but China is not a nationality as such. The nationality is the nationality of the constituent peoples of China, of which the Tibetans are a very important part, because the lands of Tibetans comprise quite a large chunk of the territory of today's People's Republic of China.
Yes. As you said, today we're here in Canada celebrating Canada Day. But the day that we're celebrating Canada Day, China is implementing this ethnic unity and progress law. And people, for those who are unversed with, China's policies, this could sound very, benign, very well intentioned, because it is made to sound in a unity. Who would be against unity?
Yeah,
and
everyone
a progress.
loves ethnic unity and progress,
So what would you say, Charles, for those, who are unversed with this China's benign way of presenting, hidden behind the euphemism, whether it is, a great rejuvenation of Chinese nation? Who would be against the rejuvenation of any nation? Or the community of shared destiny, and who would be against the community? But today, the ethnic unity and progress law is the topic, and as you said, it's really designed to assimilate and erase the identity of nationalities like Uyghurs, Tibetans, Inner Mongolians. But there seem to be so many other aspects to this law. The ethnic erasure is one part of it, but there also seems to be a discussion on transnational aspect of it. Mm-hmm. So how would it affect to people like you and I sitting in Canada?
Well, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, Article 63 of the law suggests that not supporting the Chinese Communist Party's notion of what makes up ethnic unity by using concepts such as religion and culture will be criminalized in China, even if it's occurring out of the jurisdiction of China, which is, very problematic in terms of international law. Mm-hmm. So I think by making this podcast, Sherip and myself are committing a crime as defined in the ethnic unity law, and I'm sure that there will be a further document coming out that will explain the specific regulations and sanctions that would be applied to people who have violated this law inside China and evidently outside of China. Sherip and I are already sanctioned by the Chinese regime, so we can't actually go there to be arrested. But I mean, there is the possibility that countries that have extradition treaties with China might extradite people like Sherip and myself who are identified as defending the cultural integrity, civilization, religion, and language of the Tibetans and other nations whose homelands are within the territory of today's People's Republic of China. And I would say, in addition to the Tibetan Autonomous Region, the lands of Tibetans extend into the province of Qinghai, parts of Sichuan, parts of Yunnan as well.
And Gansu, yes.
And Gansu, yes. Pretty much all of Qinghai, I think. Yes. And so when you look at the map, you see, the Tibetan Autonomous Region, it's not that big. Yeah. But if you actually understand where Tibetans have traditionally lived, it's a much larger territory.
Absolutely.
And I think that, when the People's Republic of China was established and the doctrine of the Chinese Communist Party of all those 105 years ago, it was about the People's Republic of China being a union of the great nationalities within that territory. So the Han are one, and they're primarily located along the eastern coast of China. And then you've got the Mongolians who have the Inner Mongolian Autonomous Region, but are co-ethnic to the Republic of Mongolia, which is sort of to the north of the eastern part of China. And then you have the Uyghurs, who occupy what they regard as East Turkestan, a large territory in the west, north and west. And then you have the Tibetan territory, which takes up quite a bit of Western China, bordering on India. And so, from that point of view, China saw itself not as a Chinese nation, but as a country composed of a union of the different nations that made it up, including the Miao, which are largely in the southern part of China. So the government promised autonomy for these nations, that they would be able to deal with their own affairs in accordance with their own customs, have their own structures of authority, political authority, educate their children in their own language, and maintain their religious and cultural practices.
At least in theory.
I mean, that was the theory, yes. I mean, that was the dream, right? Yes. That was what was promised at the time.
Yes.
And so, as you say, subsequently, China set up these autonomous regions, the Tibet Autonomous Region, the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, and so on. But it turned out that there was no true autonomy in those regions, that they were controlled by the Chinese Communist Party institution in the autonomous regions, which was inevitably under the control of a Han Chinese.
I mean, in theory, these regions have the word autonomy attached to it. But in practice, one could say that the level of autonomy in the so-called autonomous regions are far lesser than any mainstream Chinese cities.
Yes.
Let's say Tibetans and Uyghurs and Mongolians have far lesser autonomy than the ones living in Beijing, Shanghai. So another, the subtopic I wanted to ask Charles is, so as you said, you and I are sanctioned by China, and Canada in the recent years conducted public inquiry to study, Chinese foreign interference. And when we speak out, we are deemed as threat to so-called Chinese national security, sovereignty, and development interests. We're being accused of interfering in internal affairs of China. And this law, the Ethnic Unity and Progress Law, a part of it is designed to curtail such international voice, speaking out to China. So where does this lead to, I would say double standard, hypocrisy? In one level, we see real evidences of Chinese foreign interference in various levels of government in Canada. In Canada's own cyber, I think, Department of Cyber, issued a report earlier this year.
Communication,
basically stating that China is the topmost, cyber foreign interference perpetrator, and so did the Justice Hague Public Commission report.
Oh, I worked in the communications security establishment many years ago, and I think that there is a lot of concern about China's ability to gather information through cyber espionage, including, of course, attempting to obtain technologies that are useful to China, dual-use military technologies that China could use in time of conflict, and information about individuals like myself and Shirap. I think that, this extraterritoriality application of the law is very problematic in international law. I mean, we're here in Canada, we're engaging in our own free speech, perfectly legal in this country, and in fact should be encouraged. And what we're doing is perfectly acceptable in terms of international norms. We're not slandering anybody or libeling anybody or fomenting hatred in any way. But the Chinese apply their own law and then suggest that our activities here, because they wouldn't be acceptable if we were having a podcast in the People's Republic of China, could make us eligible for extradition.
Yes.
I mean, for example, if we went to countries that are very much beholden to China, say Cambodia or Laos, it's conceivable that the Chinese could issue an extradition request to the Cambodian and Laotian government or some other governments, their African governments, South American governments, and have us transported to China, where we would face criminal proceedings. In theory, seems a bit of a stretch, but you can't rule this possibility out. But it's definitely wrong. I think the other aspect is, in terms of international law, China is a member of the UN. Therefore, China has to accept the terms of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the associated covenants. And in fact, a real sticking point in terms of the legality of this law, even inside China, is that China has ratified the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights.
Yes.
And that's the covenant which guarantees that peoples can maintain their own language, religion, educate their children in their language and culture, and that's guaranteed under the UN. So when a country ratifies a UN covenant, the ratification is contingent on that country making its own laws and practices into compliance with the international covenant. And this ethnic law clearly not only violates the relevant Chinese constitution and other provisions, but it also is illegal because it violates China's commitment to the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and some other documents like the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights that China has signed but not ratified, or the Convention of the Rights of the Child, which also suggests that children should be allowed to maintain the cultural integrity of their nationality. So it really is a highly problematic law. Maybe you can talk a bit more about what this law is prescribing in terms of the assimilationist aspects that it seems to which has come into effect in China as we speak today.
Yes, absolutely. I think I would say this. It is not the start of China's process of forced assimilation. The process has started long ago. It makes it legal. It makes it official, and it gives them a legal excuse to enforce it. I also wanted to discuss on this another aspect of this law. There's this Chinese sociologist, I think, academic Ma Rong, and Ma Rong said this about ethnicity. I think almost more than 10 years ago. He brings this rationale that there should be no preference among the different ethnicity, and everyone should have equal treatment, assuming that Tibetan Uyghurs are given a preferential treatment. So he argues that if the preferential treatments are taken away from ethnic minorities, then there would be a more equal economic growth among various ethnicities in China. Yet it conveniently ignores the fact that Tibet Uyghurs remain economically, based on the UN Development Index, ranks lowest in entire PRC region. So how does that, could he have, and he himself is a minority who is Muslim, and for someone to have such a academic perspective and pushing this into a political arena, and it could have really played a role in Xi Jinping and his Politburo members really at least getting more assurance on their forced assimilation policy when you have an academic really pushing the narrative of no ethnic preference.
Yeah, I mean, this is something which is a big debate in the West. I mean, Chinese, Tibetans and Uyghurs and so on get preferential treatment in the Unified University entrance exam. They can enter university with a lower score than the Han people. And there was in the past preferential treatment of Tibetans and other groups with regard to the one-child policy. So, and I think there have been other quotas that have been applied, but I think the point that you raise is the bottom line, which is under the Human Development Index, the Tibetans have not enjoyed the benefits of China's modernization because of the Chinese Communist Party's policies, which have not been distributing the benefits of the state to the Tibetans. And so, we see Tibetan natural resources being used for the benefit of the Han people in the East Coast, and the Tibetans are not getting the benefits that they should have.
Let's conclude on this topic by discussing, Charles, where do you think this whole thing will lead to? Will China, further go in the direction of, totalitarian? Of course, it's a totalitarian regime, but where would this, what would be a real impact to the Tibetan Uyghurs living in China today?
Yeah, before this law came in, because there were these laws designed to protect the culture and civilization of the nationalities, I always hoped that we could convince enlightened elements within the Chinese Communist Party to implement the laws as written, that there would be an autonomous region where Tibetans would be masters in their own house, and that their leaders would be their co-ethnics. This hasn't happened. I think the direction that we're looking at, particularly as when I read the law, there doesn't seem to be the word autonomous in there anywhere, that they're going to eliminate the autonomous regions and simply make Tibet into a province of China on this basis, as you say, of Marong, suggesting that, why should we have a Tibetan autonomous region that would discriminate against the opportunities for other groups, particularly the Han, who are in Tibet. So I'm feeling that until there's a fundamental political change inside China, where they accept the idea of citizenship and human rights, that we're going to see more and more of this assimilationist tendency, and Tibetan children will not become familiar with their own language and culture, and will speak Mandarin Chinese and look towards Han Chinese norms for their aspirations. And certainly there are clauses in that law which suggest that very thing.
Well, that I think with that, we would end the first episode of our podcast. Yeah. And you talked about the reform, and that I think would be our topic for the second episode. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you on the second episode of Burton and Therchin Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this talk.
Burton and Therchin.
Burton and Therchin.